first virtual speaker series. There we go. Welcome, everybody. This is our first virtual speaker series seminar for the Foucault and Sociolegal Study CRN. To introduce myself, I'm Michael Sousa, one of the organizers of it, and Sarah Turnbull, who can certainly speak for herself, is my co-organizer. I'm glad everyone is here. Today, we have very graciously Miroslaw Sadowski with us, who is going to be talking about his work, Foucault and transitional justice between the notions of power and counter memory in the case of Central and Eastern Europe. And I think we decided to give Miroslaw some time to present his work, and then we have an opportunity to ask questions and engage with him. So without further ado, take it away, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation, Michael and Sarah. It is great to be here. So I just have this very small presentation, so just bear with me. So just to introduce myself, as Michael introduced me, my name is Miroslaw Sadowski, and I defended my doctoral thesis at McGill Law a couple of weeks back. So in my research and also in what I'll be speaking about today, I focus on the intersections. Thank you, Sarah, for the claps, virtual claps. I'll focus on the intersections between law and collective memory, and that was also the title of my thesis, Law and Memory Intersections. So basically, I asked the question about how law can influence social perspectives on the past. And in this, in the search for the answer to this question, I turned to several different thinkers, and one of these, and the one who next to Durkheim perhaps impacted my work, the work in my thesis the most, is Michel Foucault, and I'll be speaking about him and his ideas on the issues of memory in a minute. But first, perhaps let's start with this question. What is collective memory? I know that not everybody is familiar with the term. So collective memory is a concept that was introduced by Maurice Aulfax in the 1920s. He's a French sociologist who was, building up on the earlier work by Bergson and Durkheim, proposed that how we remember and what we remember, it's not only on the individual level, it is not only our own memories, but also the memories that are impacted by the different groups we are in, by family, religious groups, and also today in this modern age nation. And we can even speak about certain global memories thanks to globalization. For example, 9/11 is a particular case of a moment that everybody remembered all around the world, and that's a global collective memory. And the way how exactly collective memory works is, of course, largely debated by sociologists ever since, and psychologists, and also lawyers. There's been even a proposal to carve out a special field called memory studies, that would just interdisciplinarily analyze the different aspects of how collective memory works within society. There's also a journal called Memory Studies that is on the forefront of this this study. And personally, I usually explain collective memory by asking for people to remember one of their own earliest memories, be it first day in kindergarten or perhaps a birth of a sibling. And usually when we start thinking about this moment and like really thinking and asking ourselves, what exactly do we remember and how do we remember, it will most likely, unless somebody has perfect recall, of course, because this also happens, it will turn out that that this memory of when we were 4, 5, 6 years old is actually not really our own memory per se, because it has been impacted by the photographs, by what we have been told by our families, and so on. So maybe I'll stop here, so I could speak about collective memory and what it is and isn't for a long time. So the second concept, I have something that might be that you might be more familiar with, because it has been used quite a lot most recently, is that of transitional justice. So transitional justice is this idea describing the different processes that take place following a transition from one regime to another. In most typical cases, it means transition from non-democratic regime to a democratic regime. However, in the studies that have been taking place more recently, and also I have been participating in one, it can be shown that whether or not transition is from non-democratic to democratic, or from non-democratic to a different type of non-democratic regime, these processes, transitional processes, are often quite similar, and these involve changes to the official narrative of the state. These can be visible changes, the ones that I'll be speaking about today, and also invisible changes to history textbooks, to street names, to the way that to the name of the country, to various legal acts organizing these shifts. And these are supposed to grant not only legitimacy to the new authorities, but also our way of allowing the society to cope with the transition. Once the transition becomes visible, the transitionary process can be more settled. However, how settled exactly, we'll see once I get to my case studies. To this is why cultural heritage matters for the new authorities, because this is in a way the basis for my case studies. This official narrative, these collective memories that the authorities will put forward, often are visible. We can all think about pulling down a monument, for example, or changing the name of the main square in a city, as just some of the two examples of the ways these processes take place. This is very important for the new authorities, because, as I mentioned just before, these visible changes allow the society to come to terms with the change, for the new authorities to anchor this change, and and I'll explain this term in a minute, for the counter memories of the past to come forward. And why counter memories? I'll explain in a minute, because this is where we get to our hero today, Foucault. So what can Foucault tell us about collective memory processes? So Foucault, as many other thinkers, does not actually use the term collective memory. He speaks about history. However, both in my research, and which is based on several other researchers, his understanding of history in certain instances is that of memory, or collective memory. And he perhaps most famously described this relation with power over collective memory, speaking about France. And let me pull up the actual citation, because it's quite interesting. So speaking about how the force of official narratives impacts collective memory, or perception of the past of the people, he noted that thanks to the omnipresence of the Gaullist version of the events of World War II with the French popular culture, after the Second World War, the whole country was, and here I quote, exonerated by the Gaul, while the right was purified and sanctified by him. this has in turn resulted in a certain, and I cite again, reprogramming of popular memory, which existed but had no way of expressing itself. In such case, he argued, and one final citation maybe here, people are shown not what they are, but what they must remember having been. And as he further observed, the question of collective memory history is clearly linked to that of power. If one controls people's memory, one controls their dynamism. In addition, one also controls their experience, their knowledge of previous struggles. Okay, I'll stop here. I think it's enough. So, so Foucault was, well, speaking about history, and we can translate this to the memory concept, I think, much better, and was perhaps the first thinker globally to that this directly present these links on a very particular case that we all also can understand, the building of the myth of the resistance in France, and this exoneration, as he called it, of the French population. Foucault clearly painted these links between power over the past and how the authorities can and do actually use it. And he created a term, and here it was actually using the term memory, counter memory or counter history. He uses both in his works analyzing the power relation, and he called counter memories. He called those memories that do not have a place in the official narrative, however, still exist in the society, and when the time comes, they might boil over or have an impact on the popular culture. And in my work, I take this counter memory concept and put forward an idea of what I call a collective memory inversion. Because during one regime, we have a certain set of official memories, official narratives, and another set of narratives, counter narratives, counter memories. However, when the new authorities come to power, once we have a transition, what takes place is a certain collective memory inversion, because what used to be counter memory becomes new official narrative, whereas the former official narrative, that of the former authorities, becomes counter memory itself. And because now they are in the minority, at least in terms of power. And this is, of course, this is quite visible, for example, in the case of Iran, where we had also a transition from one non-democratic regime to another non-democratic regime. And the two regimes had a completely different official narratives. The Pahlavi regime's narrative was one of Iran as a friend of the West, of a modern country that needs to be built, and not to dwell so much on Islamic past, but digging much deeper into Persian, pre-Islamic Persian history. That of Khomeini and his acolytes was counter-narrative that was building up, and then during the revolution and after the revolution exploded, and we had a complete memory inversion, because turn to Islamic past, removal of any references to not only the Shah, but in general the royal history of Iran, if we may say so. And these observations based on Foucault can be applied, and I use them on several case studies. And well, being from Central and Eastern Europe myself, today I chose to speak about 3 countries, rather briefly, because we could do a big analysis, obviously, of each and every one of them. However, they're particularly interesting because, well, not only that is where the war is currently, so it's good to have a deeper perception, perhaps, of of the narratives that are being formed and used there, but also because all the free countries, and in general almost all countries of Central Europe in the second decade in the 21st century had a particular shift in terms of official narratives in speaking again generally, and it will differ from country to country, but taking in particular Poland and Hungary, the two countries with which I start, two countries which were success stories of the post-communist transformation, very liberal economies, very liberal policies in terms of history. Then come 2010 in Hungary, 2015 in Poland, return to refocus on conservatism, digging deeper into history to propose new pathways forward. And Ukraine is a slightly different case, so I'll leave it out of this generalization for now. So very briefly, because I think I'm already at 15 minutes, and sorry, I'll just take a bit of water. Case of Poland, as I mentioned, one of the success stories of post-communist transformation, and even when the current Conservative Party won the first time in 2005 the elections, they were very liberal on the economy. Then we have come 2015, complete refocus of the policy once they regain power, digging deep into the past. And also the major points, even though a transition happened in 89/90, still we have certain amount of communist monuments, communist street names present in the public spaces. So one of the big campaign slogans is the complete removal of communism from the public spaces. And of course, linked to that, of any post-communist parties and peoples from power. That is, of course, linked. So what we can observe in Poland, the National Institute of Memory, it's a very particular institution that we don't have time to speak about in detail, but in general, in all post-communist countries, there exists particular institutions which usually house archives of the former communist secret services, and they prepare various historical publications on their basis. And they are used by successive governments to disseminate the particular historical policy of those actually in power. If the liberals in power, there is a particular focus on certain issues, on history. If conservatives are in power, there is a complete refocus. And that's these institutes exist not only in Poland or Hungary, but also Germany, Czechia, Bulgaria, basically all the former post-communist countries. Of course, not Russia, but that's a very different case. So the new government asks the Institute of National Memory to prepare a list of all the monuments in Poland and all the street names that still require changing. And then when in certain instances, local authorities, well, of course, in those cases, local authorities that are not sympathetic to the government do not want to implement the changes, then after 6 months, if the change doesn't happen, the government, through its regional official, can implement the change itself. And it's sometimes happened. And then what's very visible is that the name change to the street name or square always will be to a person taken from the particular new political history of the government. So, for example, references to the anti-communist partisans fighting after the Second World War, or people who died in the Smolensk catastrophe in 2010. Local authorities are often not happy with these changes, even once they take place. So they sometimes challenge them in court. And in a couple of instances, it went up to the High Administrative Court, where the basic question was that the court had to decide it was whether a communist can have a right to be a patron of a street name or a square, and weighing in whether being a communist and being, for example, a great regional leader, what outweighs what. So very different cases. However, in most, the court decided that a communist cannot be a patron of a street name, even when he had particular successes on the regional level. On in certain instances, the spaces are only reimagined. For example, in Łódź, which is the third biggest city in Poland, the main square was called the Liberty Square, and that was the liberty that meant that when Soviet army entered the city in 1944 or 5. However, the city council did not want to change that name, even though it was on the list. So they added a plaque saying Victory Square or Liberty Square, but referencing it to a different historical event. And that was the case. Case of monuments, there were not that many issues because usually there was nothing to fight for. These are usually quite ugly concrete constructions, and they were often, in some cases, pulled down and just destroyed and never replaced. And for example, here on the photo is a symbol of the fighting Poland from the period of Second World War. So this is something that would typically replace the old communist symbols. It comes to Hungary, a very particular approach. In Hungary, this war in Poland, the focus was on the whole country and anti-communism on all the different levels. Hungary, as usual, a much more pragmatic approach, focused particularly on Budapest, the capital, and playing fast and loose with the own government's rules. So the focus in particular on the square in front of the parliament, Lajos Kossuth Square, and which was reconfigured during the times of communism and post-communism. So, so the government passed an act which meant that the square is to be returned to its form from 1944. However, certain monuments that the government deemed possible to remain were allowed to remain. For example, the monument to the 1956 uprising. On the other hand, monument to Imre Nagy, the communist prime minister who led the 1956 uprising, being a communist, could not have space in front of the parliament. He was moved to another square a bit further from the parliament. Again, at the same time, big, cumbersome, ugly monuments to the Red Army in gratitude for the liberation of Hungary still remaining in the middle of Budapest, because it's protected by bilateral treaty between Hungary and Russia, and Hungary, well, still is buying cheap gas from Russia, and this monument is only one of the more tangible elements of this particular political game. However, to placate the anti-communist that the current governing party is supposed to promote, this square was also reconfigured. So next to the Red Army monument, there's a monument to Ronald Reagan. That's the one in the photo, and he's strolling casually towards the Red Army monument. Next to the Reagan monument, another monument to a different American president, George H.W. Bush. So the whole space reconfigured, reimagined, and a couple other monuments that also in the vicinity. So on the one hand, Russia is happy because the monument is kept. On the other hand, the anti-communists in the country are also happy because this whole public space reconfigured and reimagined. And last but not least, the case of Ukraine. A very different situation in Ukraine. course, Ukraine did not become a full democracy after 1989. The changes to the cityscapes were only preliminary and very different in the western part. Basically, all statues of Lenin, Stalin, and other USSR dignitaries were pulled down. In the eastern part of Ukraine. They remained, and it was and the historical perspective of Ukraine and Russia were still quite very much aligned until 2014. We have the Maidan Revolution, and then the complete and for the first time profound reconfiguration of the official Ukrainian political narrative on the past. So we see monuments pulled down all around the country this time. Also, very similarly to Poland, a list of names that need to be changed. One of the major cities in Ukraine, for example, changed its name from the name that was given. Part of name was added during Soviet times that was removed. We have a particular policy prepared by the Ukrainian Institute of National Memory, which says how to speak about, for example, participation of Ukrainians in the Red Army during the Second World War. Very detailed instructions on how to reference these events in the media, in public speeches. So complete reconfiguration, and one that we can see had worked on a certain levels. Even in eastern parts of Ukraine following the war, we didn't have any welcoming committees for invading Russians, and that's something that we can now say Russians were hoping for. So we can see an actual memory shift in Ukraine over the past decade or so. Of course, still certain issues because Ukraine is often choosing very problematic heroes as the new patrons. And for example, those organizations of Ukraine nationalists which were involved in mass atrocities during the Second World War on Jews and Poles and other minorities. So another set of problems. However, still a major reconfiguration. And I think my time is basically up. So just to conclude, so through this analysis, this Foucault's thoughts on the relations between power, state, authority, memory, counter-memory, history are very useful because quite often still when we speak about the transitional justice processes, we often focus only on what's happening very visibly, but not why these changes are happening. And thanks to Foucault and also other, of course, researchers, these thoughts allow us for a more profound and detailed analysis of why these changes are actually taking place and why they are taking this particular shape. And this focus on the political, even though almost all these changes being in Poland, Hungary, Ukraine, even in the case of Iran, these changes took the shape of law, legal acts on various levels, administrative law, acts of parliament, decisions of government, presidential decrees. However, behind this supposedly objective law, we have very strict notions of power that only become visible if we actually ask ourselves, why is this happening and why is this taking this particular shape? So I think I'll stop there, and thank you. And here is my email also if you decide to write to me. Thank you.
So thank you.